All right, guys, welcome back. Jiu Jitsu Motivation Podcast. My name is Greg Melita, black belt, second degree, owner of Hampton's Jiu Jitsu.
And I'm Brian DeLuca, Jiu Jitsu black belt and author of Jiu Jitsu for Small People and Other Weird Shit I Think About.
The small people Jiu Jitsu is the way, Brian. Is the way. So guys, got an awesome show for you today, all the way from Australia. All right, Mr. Jase from Gypsy Tales got an amazing podcast called Gypsy Tales. Welcome aboard, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, so I really wanted to bring you on. You know, I've just been following your podcast, and I actually grew up racing motocross, and I just feel like there's so many crossover and similarities, and I love the intersection. I've never really seen either in motocross, besides your podcasts, and ours now, doing this kind of cross section where we see the similarities, and not only in the sports themselves, but through podcasting and how podcasting is just changing the landscapes of many different sports. When did you start Gypsy Tales?
I think it was like, actually the first episode went on iTunes on the 1st of January 2018. So I was kind of working on it like a little bit behind the scenes. I actually lived in America for 8 years. And then I had some health issues that then created a visa issue. So I kind of just got like stranded back in Australia. A lot of my equipment was still in America. I literally had enough equipment to do a podcast. And it was pretty new. Like I remember coming home from the States and being like, oh, did you see this episode of Rogan? Did you hear this podcast? And no one really was doing the podcast thing. No one was really listening to podcasts. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe if I'm going to be kind of stuck here, I'll do something that no one else is doing. And then that's sort of what led into Gypsy Tales. And I actually, what I was doing in America, I had a film production company. Red Bull was one of my biggest clients, and I would travel around the world shooting all the big like motocross and action sports and surfing. And so I had that production background. So production's really all I knew. So I was like, all right, I'll just produce my own thing while I'm kind of waiting to get back to America. And it took off. And it's actually similar time I started jiu-jitsu randomly. And then, it was just kind of like a pretty good little grounding for me, like I was really more dedicated to jiu-jitsu than the podcast, to be honest. Like I felt like for probably the first year I was doing jiu-jitsu seriously and the podcast on the side. And it just kind of let it do its thing really naturally. And I was like really into jiu-jitsu, trying to get good at it. And then I look up 12 months later and I got a pretty good podcast. So it's kind of a pretty funny story. But yeah, it's been great ever since.
So what led you to jiu-jitsu? What made you start doing jiu-jitsu?
Man, super random. Like I did Taekwondo as a kid, and I would do boxing at school. I always loved like martial arts and fighting. I remember watching the first Ultimate Fighter and just being a huge fan. And then I listened to Rogan, and so there was like, I guess that brought some more awareness around it. Funny, I actually did a jiu-jitsu class in California. It was like a Carlson, I think is Carlson Gracie the one with the bulldog logos?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did a class at a Carlson Gracie gym like 7 years ago, I reckon. And after the last roll, I was kind of just like chilling with my arms back, and this dude, like a big dude, slipped and fell and broke my wrist. So that was like my first jiu-jitsu class. And I didn't have health insurance. I had like this wrist brace on for months. So I was like, all right, well, I think I better not do jiu-jitsu. And then fast forward until 2018, one of my best friends, his kid, Axel Howie, he's like a little bit of a phenom in Australia. Like he's really, really, really good. And then they were just in town, and Judd, the dad, who's one of my best mates, said, you should come along and watch him do this jiu-jitsu competition. And I was kind of like talking with him about it, and he's like, oh, you know a fair bit about the positions, and you know what side control is, and you know what mount is, and you know what omoplata is, and And he's like, you should do a class. And that was on a Sunday. And then Monday morning, I went to a 9:30 class. I was like, yeah, I should do a class. And then, yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
It's fun. It's funny how addicting it is. You know, it's like all of us. And honestly, I believe it actually helps you in all aspects of your life. It changes the way you think about things, the way you see things. You know,
Completely,
so no matter what you're working on, it's gonna help.
Yeah, no, and I noticed you hear a lot of people say like jiu-jitsu changed their life. I wouldn't say jiu-jitsu changed my life. Like I wasn't looking for anything or whatever, but there was definitely I was learning a lot about life and I was trying to get better at life, and jiu-jitsu became like this, and it still is this kind of medium to make that like an experiential component to like the knowledge of like, okay, this is what you should do in life to get better at life. And then jiu-jitsu is like this microcosm where it's like, okay, apply those lessons here and test it, see if it does work. And I feel like that in that sense, it really has made all of my life better.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. That's like everybody, I think a lot of people when they start and then they get into it, I think that's like one of the most common things that you hear. I mean, for me, that was motocross for me too, which is the other reason why I wanted to bring you on. And getting into that a little bit. What's your motocross history? Because I know Australia's got a huge motocross history too.
Yeah, so I mean, that's like I would tell people like I have a black belt in motocross. Like if there was a thing that you know what I mean, if that was a thing. My dad raced when I was a kid. I don't have a memory of my life without me and motorcycles. It was like my first obsession. It was my escape. It was the thing like when I was a kid in my life, I thought my life was hard. It was like go to the track, be around my buddies, build jumps, like, think about racing, watch racing DVDs, read about motocross. So, you're obsessed with Crusty Demons and all that too, right?
Mate,
everything. Yeah, it was just across the board. Bikes is all I wanted to do, and I knew I wasn't ever going to be like good enough to race them professionally. So I bought a camera when I was 18. I had some really fast friends, and I was like, all right, I'm going to make videos like the Crusty Demons that I grew up watching. With my friends, and then that is what kind of led me to America. And then bikes has been my entire life.
Yeah, same here, just growing up here, particularly living on the back of Southern State Parkway, where it's just all, just woods that can never be built on. And I think it was a pretty special thing because you just see it in your neighbor. One of my neighbors just had a little PW50 and we were just all like just enamored with it, and then my dad wound up buying me a 1975 DS80, and then we all just, as neighbors, just started racing. The first track when I was 9 years old was the Bridgehampton Sand Track. So, we wound up getting that. I started in 60 cc's, and I mean, for me, it was a childhood. That was like my first thing that I ever, obsessed about. I mean, for me, it was
just a crazy taste of freedom too when you ride a bike as a kid. Like there's so many rules when you're a kid, and you've got to you can't go here, you can't do this. But then like your dad puts you on a bike and slaps you on the ass, and it's like you're in control. Like it's your life, it's your world.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing on the track, and especially if you're racing at a track or there's trail stuff. Like it's up to you, man. You determine what you do. You know what I mean? Like this, you can. Freedom of expression. And it's the same with jiu-jitsu. Like that's how jiu-jitsu evolves. Like you're putting your own flavor in it. There's no rules, like with the exceptions of going to, into different tournament rule sets. I mean, on the mat, get out of side control, figure it out. Show us what you can come up with. You know what I mean? Look at like James Stewart with scrubbing when that first came about. Nobody was doing that before he started scrubbing. And then all of a sudden, wow, you can shave a couple seconds a lap just by turning the bike over as you go over a jump, and so you're keeping the bike low and not just trying to go for the height. I mean, there's so many little things that I relate motocross and jiu-jitsu to, and I've never seen those two industries cross over as well as on your podcast, man. So another shout out for that.
No, I appreciate that, and it's definitely I haven't even really kind of gone in on that yet. I mean, definitely, I'd love to do more. Like I've got some.
Oh, I sense some future projects here. Oh,
yeah, 100%, and it's cool too. I mean, I think that jiu-jitsu is in a pretty rad place as well, where like Jonah Hill, Action Bronson, like Kelly Slater. I mean, one of my best friends, Jack Freestone, it was pretty epic, like this year at Narrabeen for the WSL. We went down, I drove down to Sydney, I took my mats, we got this Airbnb, and we've just rearranged the whole living room, put mats down, and we're like drilling 50-50 right before, literally in his board shorts for his heat. And then he puts his jersey on for his heat, and then he goes out and he does like this crazy air, wins this heat, and then we like get a coffee, come back to the hotel, and then it's like more 50-50, So
that's pretty funny. It was like his warm up and his stretching, was his jiu-jitsu.
It was, yeah, and he performed great. And so there's so many really cool people that are getting into jiu-jitsu, and I think there was like Rogan was really like this first wave. And then I think that, there's like a butterfly effect that's like still rippling out that we still haven't fully seen play out. So it's exciting. And then
it's still really early, man. It's really still really early. Like you said, I mean, I have my academy in the Hamptons Jiu-Jitsu, and, after I think it was a couple of months, we had this guy come in. We get a lot of visitors from the city because we're, pretty tourist area in the Hamptons there. And then, come to my knowledge, which I didn't even realize, some guy's like, hey, you know who that is over there? And I'm like, no. And that's like, oh, that's Steven Spielberg's son. So Sawyer Spielberg has been training with us for like 4 months, just popped in, and he's like, hey, I came from Unity, but everybody's calling your place the beach house. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, cool, man, come in, train. And, but that's how it is. Like, to have like, and discover things like that. Like that's how people want to be in jiu-jitsu. Like, people don't know who everybody is on the mat, but that's not why we're there,
Yeah, and I mean that's one thing. Oh, sorry, Brian.
Oh no, go Jase.
No, I think that's one cool thing about jiu-jitsu. You go into the academy, and there's like a level of respect that is earned by people that is like so tangible, and it's like more tangible than money. They say like you can't buy time. You can't buy more time. It's like, well, you can't buy respect in a jiu-jitsu gym either. Yeah. Like you could be a fucking janitor, and then if you're the dude on the mat, like you're the dude. Like I could be Steven Spielberg, I could be whoever, but it's like does not matter who you are. Like that respect that you can get by being like, first of all, a badass, or having like a crazy amount of heart, or being super technical, or being like the most helpful training partner, or the most humble person in the gym. Like there's a respect level in jiu-jitsu that you just can't buy. And I think that's probably the appeal to some of these people, like a guy like a Jonah Hill or Action Bronson or a Kelly Slater. Like they live in these weird worlds where people do treat them differently, but in jiu-jitsu it's just like, bro, there's a completely different currency. Yeah. And you got to earn that shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how it is in motocross too. Like I remember, when I was younger, everybody was too busy worried about, what latest Fox gear do you have, or what decals on your bike? Did you guys get the Renthal handlebars? Meanwhile, it didn't matter if you were first at the finish line. You know what I mean? And you were doing like there was, it doesn't matter. You wearing your clothes are falling off and ripping because it's old. It doesn't matter. You're out there and you finish first, and however you can do that, and that's how different styles come about. It's yet another thing that's like, it's just all about the currency is how you are on the mat, or how you're finishing on the track. It's such an amazing correlation.
Yeah. No one cares about $100 rash guard or a $300 gi. It doesn't matter. You're going to get your ass whooped. You're going to get your ass whooped,
Yeah. I mean, that was
100%.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Australian Jiu-Jitsu, because this is kind of an awesome, phenomenon out of Australia. I mean, I remember I met Kit Dale at the last ADCC when I went there live and was chatting with him, and I've met Craig Jones at a lot of the Kasai shows that I worked with, and then hanging out with Levi Jones at a whole weekend when we did a Kasai show, and that kid is just awesome. What's the kind of the culture of Australian Jiu-Jitsu? Is it like kind of not a lot of schools around? Maybe it's concentrated in certain areas?
Nah, man, jiu-jitsu is massive here, man. I think one of the underrated things, I've actually never really thought about it until kind of I was about to come on the podcast, but man, so I live in the Gold Coast, Australia. So I basically live in Rio de Janeiro of Australia. And there's a lot of Brazilians here. So my professor, Fabio Galeb, he's been in Australia, I think, like 12 or 15 years. He owns 4 or 5 academies here.
Right.
So I think that why jiu-jitsu is so good in Australia is because it's like a little bit of a migration haven for Brazilians, you know, like there's a lot of Brazilians here. The weather's really good. It's a lot like Brazil here, especially on the Gold Coast. And yeah, so there's been some like kind of OG dudes around Australia for a really long time. And then those guys have, I guess, created these gyms where you've seen guys like Lachlan Giles come out of, and then Kit Dale, then Craig Jones. We've had like Anthony Perosh was like an early MMA guy. So there's some like real OG dudes here. And yeah, I think a big part of that is like this kind of Brazilian migration that sort of did happen. And then, yeah, now, like, I mean, I've spent a lot of time training with Lachlan at Absolute MMA. I've gone on like some camps with him, and whenever I'm in Melbourne for competitions, I go down there. So I think that what you saw is like this early migration that created like this really great foundation for jiu-jitsu in Australia through the Brazilians. And then offshoots of that with guys like Lachlan, and then, you know, like he brought up Craig and that whole crew. And I think now too that you're seeing guys for the first time not feel like they have to leave Australia to get great training. Like there's guys like Lockie that's got his school there down in Melbourne that people from other places in the world were coming to him. So yeah, it's really, really evolving, and COVID's been a really tough time for a lot of people. Like we've had some pretty extensive lockdowns. So I feel terrible for everybody that has had to go through that in Australia. I've personally been quite lucky in Queensland. We've probably been one of the luckiest states. But yeah, jiu-jitsu's crazy, man. Like a lot of local competitions, a lot of kids doing it, a lot of schools, a lot of classes. So it's a really, I think it's in a really, really good spot in Australia for sure.
It's awesome. So are there a lot of big competitions like in Australia, like big competitions coming out, or?
Yeah.
Do you see like IBJJF there at all, or any sub-only stuff?
Yeah, oh, heaps, man. Like the scene is killing it. So do you know Ben Hodgkinson? He faced Gordon first round at ADCC. So he runs Grappling Industries in Australia. There was actually just a Grappling Industries in my city this weekend.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of Grappling Industries. There's George Hanlon. He does the ADC Australia stuff. He runs a Subversion, which is like a Kasai type fight show, which is awesome. Like they live stream it. There's another fight night that they do on the Gold Coast, which is really great. Taliesin Suarez just fought on that recently. A bunch of our dudes from my academy at Galeb Brothers are always on those shows as well. We got some super high level dudes that train out of our academy. And then, yeah, IBJF, like I do nationals and Pan Packs every year. We've got like state championships that are run by IBJJF every year. So yeah, it's like a really thick and healthy scene here in Australia, and there's some really good dudes that are coming out of the country.
Is it a mix of gi and no gi, or is it more no gi or more gi there in Australia?
Like at the academy?
I honestly think it would be similar to America. Like I do, I think I'm in the lucky generation of jiu-jiteros, whatever you call us. But like my first week of doing jiu-jitsu, I did 2 gi classes and 2 no gi classes. So in my jiu-jitsu has just been 50-50. So yeah, and I think that I mean, there's probably, you know, some places lean more towards no gi and, you know, the leg lock stuff. My gym, I would say, is more of a traditional IBJF gi jiu-jitsu, but we do, yeah, like I said, I'll do pretty much the same amount of gi and no gi. We do an open mat for gi every week. We do an open mat for no gi. We got no gi specific classes, gi specific. So yeah, it's I'd say it's really similar to what you guys have over there.
That's awesome to hear, man. And speaking of Lachlan, like you mentioned Lachlan, and you know, when I saw him live at ADCC, I mean, that was pretty much his, like, you know, his breakout. I was lucky enough to be sitting right in the VIP section there, and then just, I mean, it goes back to what you were saying again. Like he didn't win, but it did not matter. it was his performance on the mat. I mean, open weight, tapping 3 huge guys that outweighed him by I don't know how much with heel hooks, and it's just the pureness of his style of jiu-jitsu, his technique overcomes the brute strength and all that. And I mean, that really put a lot of Australia on the map. I mean, Craig Jones obviously, but Lachlan and now Levi Jones, next up and comer. Love that kid. Just really cool to see worldwide and different people from different places succeeding.
Well, the thing too, man, you got to think about like what Lachlan did at 80cc. Does that happen if he's training full time in America and people are seeing his K guard? Like he literally, it's like he's on the other side of the world practicing some shit where no one's filming him. No, like you can't see what he's bringing, and he literally bought like a gun to a knife fight with those dudes, and he just cleaned house. And this will be an unpopular opinion, especially with Gordon Ryan, but man, Gordon wanted nothing to do with that in their match, and I'm sorry, but there was one time where like Lockie kind of half got in on a leg there, and Gordon pulled the back pedal on that one. So I just think that there's almost a little bit of something tangible there. It's like this guy was just like on the other side of the world working on some shit that no one had seen, and then he brought it to the prom and stole the dance.
So soon the debate's going to be coming: Australian Jiu-Jitsu versus American Jiu-Jitsu versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
And I wasn't one of Greg Jones's skits, right? Like Australian Jiu-Jitsu, you know what I mean? Like it's so cool to see. Like people can come up with their own flavor and style, and they're half mocking it and joking because the whole talk about now it's American Jiu-Jitsu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, we were even studying a lot of Lachlan's game because, to your point, it seemed to us that Lachlan's way of entering the legs, once again, when you're coming up with your own individuality in the style, it seemed like Lachlan's entries was more about securing the end of the leg and the heel kind of where you want it to be first, and then trying to get like a inside Senkaku, whereas where you see, a lot of EDS guys and, Danaher and all that, they want to secure their Kani Basami or however they're entering the legs around, like with the reap first, and then they're going to go for the heel. Just seemed like, I feel like Lachlan was getting that heel where he wanted it and then putting his legs where they needed to be. And it's just a slight little difference in the way he sets it up that makes it amazing,
And I think, I mean, it might be a little bit out of my pay grade, but I think like the way that he's setting it up is more with like outside leg positioning, which I think is probably a little bit better for like guard retention. So you could probably take more risks in going for the legs as opposed to like starting with leg positioning inside, and then there being, especially against bigger guys, and then like your guard in general being a little bit more vulnerable. So you play like this outside leg positioning. You've got a lot of room to kind of like the guard retention with like leg pummeling, and then kind of build your entries off that. And it seems like you can take a little bit more risk with that type of positioning. So I think on like a lot of levels, it's like extremely innovative. I guess the way that he, just went about like that whole deal.
Yeah, like backside 50-50, like, that whole like entryway into there and really placing the foot in backside, like that was a whole, really cool thing to see because, everybody's seen him at ADCC. Then, I mean, a lot of people knew of him already. I've known of him already and seen him, but when a lot of other people, like he exploded, and then they go dig up his instructionals and then they really see, where his uniqueness is. It's just so cool to see how that all came about.
And with him, like I've been around him, lucky enough to like hang around him as a mate and as a instructor. Like when I first started jiu-jitsu, I was like 5 months in. I actually went and did a 10-day camp in Thailand with him, and yeah, like just being around like the level at which he thinks about jiu-jitsu. And there's not many conversations you have with him that aren't about jiu-jitsu. And I mean, he's a PhD, like he's a PhD physiotherapist, like Dr. Lachlan Giles. So there's a very, very smart dude there. And I think, Danaher gets a lot of credit for the intelligence level that he has. And I think that Lockie's on a pretty gnarly level in terms of how he thinks about, and not just techniques too. Like he's got a really unique way of thinking about learning as one thing, and then coaching as another as well. So I think that in a few years' time, like the whole Lockie thing will start to make a bit more sense.
Well, I think it's sort of what we were talking about. We were talking about this a little bit before the pre-call, right? Some super high-level jiu-jitsu guys, a lot of them are really smart human beings, right? Really, even in general, I think jiu-jitsu has a lot of bright people, right? It just seems to attract more cerebral thinkers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, it's one of the things I enjoy about jiu-jitsu. Like when I first started, I went on just like a study binge, man. Like I did my first class, and then I went home, and my hands were like still shaking, and I like went on Amazon and typed in jiu-jitsu just to see what books there were, and I like ordered Zanji Ribeiro's Jiu-Jitsu University, and I think by the end of my first week of jiu-jitsu, I'd read that entire book. And then, like went in on the instructionals, and I just was like, study. I wanted to learn as much as possible. And I think jiu-jitsu sort of like facilitates that, because there is so much information out there. And then I think that as well as it facilitating that, I think it's like that's probably why you see those people. It's because like they can dive in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the cool things, I mean, we all have this tendency to study jiu-jitsu like obsessively to some degree, but it's like crazy because to me, at least I go, okay, these are the things that are really going to work for me. Like, so the more I get study diversity of people and styles, I'm like, okay, that will work for me. That, good that I know it, but I'll probably never pull that off in a fight, or a roll. But, having the diversity and having so much information lets you like create your own game in some ways.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm probably like, it's probably pissed my professors off to the point where like I'll commit to that. Like I just know there's stuff I'll never do. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I figured that out pretty quickly. I'm a lanky dude. I'm not the biggest dude. Like I'm real tall, real skinny, real lanky. So I'm just like, I just watched Craig Jones. I was like, well, he's tall, skinny, and lanky. So like that's my guy, and then I'll watch for the gi. It's like Nicholas Marigali and Keenan. It's like I don't have to go super far, like and right. I kind of know it's like those dudes are better than me, and like they kind of figured out the same thing.
Yeah, well, like everything, there's only, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of creativity in jiu-jitsu, but there's only so many ways the human body moves, So you figure out the things that works for you in those positions, and you work on those, Not that you shouldn't know, like you should know as much as you can, but, you figure out the things that work for your body, work for you as a fighter.
Well, I will say, like, probably one of the best things that our academy has drilled into me is fundamentals. Just fundamentals of every single level. And I think it's probably something that, like, I'm 4 years into jiu-jitsu. And yeah, there's just at no point is it like you put 6 months into fundamentals and then you're dialed. It's like literally work on fundamentals your entire jiu-jitsu career. At least that's how I feel at this point right now. And by fundamentals, I even mean like the warm-up, There's just some fundamental movements that always apply no matter like what you do at any part of your game. And that's been probably my biggest takeaway from my academy and like my professors is like fundamentals. And it sounds like the most boring thing ever, but man, they're just the basics of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, the intro stuff you learn. It's just like you could spend your life getting good at those.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like BJ Penn said it best when we trained with him in the city, and he said he's like all I do is just advance basics and I shove it down the guy's throat.
Yeah.
Like you master the basics, and then you take those basics, is even the stuff that some people would consider advanced or new school. Like you won't be able to do them unless you're good at the basics. Like they're all intertwined. They're like even like a lot of the warm-up movements we do, it's mimicking movements on the mat. So like really, you're getting good at some new stuff, but you cannot do any of the quote unquote new school stuff or advanced stuff without being great at the basics. You know, I say it all the time. I think some people think like students want to go directly to the advanced and the new stuff, and that they could try, but they're not going to really have good success with it unless they have a certain level of knowledge of the basics, you know. So I always refer back to that quote by BJ Penn: advanced basics and shove it down the guy's throat, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's a good point, because, right, if you can't get into a position, you can't pull off whatever that is you want to do, the submission or whatever. You have to be able to get to where you need to get. And without the basics, you can't do that. But I think another thing that's important, right, and we talk about this all the time, Greg, is the concepts of things, right? It's understanding the concept that actually lets you be creative and hit it from whatever, a different angle or from a different position, you know, and that becomes, I think, is a huge important thing. So along with fundamentals is the concept of how things work, you know?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. The concept-based approach of teaching, and not only is the way that I like to teach and prefer to teach, it's the way I like to learn, but also, you know, coming up in motocross, I mean, I can't tell you how many times the fundamentals came back, and it was almost like being taught in a concept base. Like when I really focused on being on the balls of my feet and not the center of my foot, you're doing jumps or you're in the whoops. I mean, the 2 inches, just 2 freaking inches of a little higher on your boot, and your whole technique on the bike changes. Or, you know, being able to just look a little bit ahead when you're entering corners. I mean, you know, just stuff like that. And that takes mat time. It takes track time too. It's a combination, you know, and especially in the 2-stroke world in motocross. I mean, it's different somewhat nowadays, but, you know, pinning that throttle and just playing with the clutch and keeping the power in the pipe and, you know, certain little things like that. But instead of just somebody telling it to you, if they frame it more in a concept approach, like the way we do, and I like to teach in Jiu Jitsu, I mean, it's just, you know, growing up in both sports and industries, it's so amazing to see. It just comes down to how humans prefer to learn.
Yeah, and man, I will say that my jiu-jitsu has almost given me like a second life in motocross. I mean, I was definitely like real industry based, and I was like in the game and, you know, like working around the sport so much. But in terms of like actually riding, I'd lost a lot of that love for it. It was just got to be so hard for me. I couldn't seem to get fit enough to do it. And then, technically, like I was just shit, you know, like you have like years off riding and you just work and you get on, you got no fitness, you got no technique. It was like not a good experience for me in the way that it was when I was younger. And man, jiu-jitsu has completely changed my motocross because I relearned how to learn. And in jiu-jitsu, I could see it as like, it was just like these techniques and concepts to you guys' point. And it was just like, it kind of changed like a bit of a light bulb for me. I was like, dude, all this shit applies to motocross. Like, what are the concepts within motocross? Like, you know, the concept of like an underhook or outside leg positioning, or, you know, like there's just different ways in terms of like your posture on top. And so there was so many concepts that I'd kind of learned through jiu-jitsu. And then it really, really made me interested in applying that to motocross. And like I've got this entirely new lease on life as a motocross rider because I'm like looking at it through a jiu-jitsu lens now. And man, like my riding, it's insane. The last few years, my riding has got so much better. I'm enjoying it so much more. And then on top of that, I think that as far as functional training goes for motocross, like I'll do jiu-jitsu like 4 or 5 times a week and then ride once on the weekend. I'm fit. Like I can do a 30-minute moto now, and my grip strength's so much better. I don't really get as much arm pump. So yeah, like to your point.
Try to talk to Alden Baker about this.
Yeah. Well, the problem is it's risky.
Or Ryan Hughes. I know Ryan Hughes is big into the whole fitness aspect of training. You've had a lot of the motocross celebrities on your show. Is there anybody that trains, you know, jiu-jitsu that races like professionally that you know of?
No, I don't. But I would like to change that. I know a couple of. I know there's a Formula One driver that's dabbled in some jiu-jitsu, but he's worth too much money to go and do.
Yeah, I mean, motocross too. I mean, these guys can't risk any injury. You know what I mean? But I tell you what, doing all the road work that they do with the road bicycles. I mean, shit.
Same shit, right?
Man, that's pretty dangerous if you ask me. Holy shit.
Okay, I don't know too much about motocross. right? I don't know too much about motocross, but I'm assuming also some of the falling we do in jiu-jitsu helps out with motocross, right?
I can't tell you how much it helped me. I mean, I got videos of one of the last races I did, and over the 75-foot triple, I was in first place and I endoed. And if I didn't front roll out of that, I mean, my collarbone, I mean, this was back, they didn't have like those cushions now that everybody wears under the helmets and all that stuff. It was just raw chest protector and helmet crashing down on the collarbone. So collarbone breaks were one of the main injuries you saw in motocross. But yeah, having the ability to fall, I mean, that's huge, I think.
Yeah, I actually just had a big one. I'm still kind of banged up from it. I did a race a few weeks ago, and a guy, like, we're going down this kind of rough sand straight. The dude's kind of back wheel kicked in front, and I was pretty close, like, trying to get past him, and I just hit this dude, like, third gear, wide open. I flew over the handlebars and then did a forward roll. I mean, I still got pretty hurt. Like, I cracked my helmet and my back and shoulders are pretty sore, but like, I got up and finished the race. And yeah, that's again, fundamentals, basics of figuring out how to do a forward roll. And I rolled out of it, and it was a really big and bad crash. So yeah, I don't know whether, and the other thing too, man, I preach, like, I'm a heretic for stretching. And mobility and flexibility. I think that's my biggest thing that's helped my jiu-jitsu in the past 12 months is like really, really committing to some mobility. And I bet when I landed, I would have done like a full pike, and that flexibility that I've been working on, I think was like a really big saving grace in a big crash like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you see all the guys that big into the flexibility and functional training, but I think that's a huge missing link that you brought up is the ability to fall. I mean, you see a lot. I mean, I remember back in the day we used to train, just pick up your bike, 100 times just to get used to when you fall, picking it up. But I mean, falling, how many falling injuries do you see? I mean, a lot of it, you can't control it. You're going so fast, or you're so high, or it's such a last minute thing and high speeds and stuff. But I can't tell you how many times knowing how to fall from jiu-jitsu helped me,
Yeah, I wish I knew it a little bit earlier, to be honest.
Right, it should be part of the basics of motocross, right?
Yeah.
Well, we don't train. Like, essentially, this is one thing that kind of like if you want to talk about like the jiu-jitsu to motocross thing, I would like look at the way I spent my life. I'm like, what the fuck have I been doing? Like, I've never trained. All I've done is essentially just rolled every day. Like, imagine you get your bike and you just do jiu-jitsu, like, or you do motocross day one. Well, we'll use the jiu-jitsu analogy. It's like you rock up to your class and you're like, okay, I don't want to drill. I don't want to learn anything. I just want to roll. It's like you might get okay at it over like years and years and years, but you're not going to get as good as if you like essentially go into this program of learning and drilling and with great coaching. And that does not exist in motocross in the way that it should, as far as I'm concerned. And I've kind of tried to take that approach to my riding in the last few years, and it's just made like I said, it's just made the biggest difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good point too. If you only went to open mats or just rolled, right? If you didn't have someone teaching you some basic stuff, it's a lot harder to figure it out on your own versus, someone going, hey, here's where you should start. Yeah,
just break some grips. Just when they grab you, just break the grip.
Right.
That might take someone months to figure out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you work it with your podcast? Because your podcast is, you got these professional motocross guys and a lot of guys in that industry. You've had some big jiu-jitsu names in there. You just randomly pick guys, and how does that work?
I'm kind of lucky, like in the sense that the career that I had before I started the podcast, I just met a lot of these dudes. But in the jiu-jitsu lane, the first guy that I met was so I reached out to Lachlan because I wanted to do his camp. I saw that he was doing like a Thailand camp, so I reached out to Lachlan. I said, hey, like, I want to come to the camp. I'd love to do the podcast with you. I'd only been doing jiu-jitsu like 5 months at this point. And then the next guest that I did, what is going on with my laptop right now? Then the next guest was Craig. and then I met Craig through Lachlan. I went down and did the Pan Packs in Melbourne, so we did the cast with him before, and then that, I think once you've got some runs on the board, and then I kind of hit up Levi, then Ari Tabak, he was here as well. So, and then like Jeremy Skinner, Ben Hodgkinson. So just guys are kind of in the area, and I'd hit them up. And yeah, I just think once you got some runs on the board, you can kind of, and that's why I put so much effort into how the podcast looks and sounds, because at the end of the day, people are going to get some cool clips out of it for their own shit anyway. And then, yeah, it's just kind of ended up sort of being what it is, I guess.
And where are you about in your jiu-jitsu training? Like you're currently a blue belt, right?
Yeah, so I've been doing it for about 4 years. When I'm in the swing of things, I try and train most days through the week. But I've had some injuries. Like I went and did a race in Western Australia in June, and I trained like quite hard for that, so I had some crashes, and then last year was a bad year. I crashed a Harley in Vietnam right before COVID. We do like this. We ride across Vietnam every year with my family, and I just crashed, and so I tore my rotator cuff. And then I got back on the bike, and I had just a really weird accident, and then I ended up breaking my hip. So last year I had like these two kind of big injuries, and then I'd sort of building back into it. But yeah, so I sort of 4 years ago I started, and I've tried and train pretty much as much as I can. I in the past, before these injuries, I was pretty actively competing as well. Like I've done I've done state championships at every belt, and then I've done nationals and Pan Packs as a white belt. I haven't got to do it as a blue belt yet, but yeah, that's my little jiu-jitsu in a nutshell.
That's cool, man. And actually, just speaking of falling for motocross, oh man, let me see if I can open this up for you here. Can you see that, Brian?
Yeah, let me just say.
This is me. I was in first place. I was on 125, and I hit the triple look, but there was a rock on the triple look. Flip over, boom, and boom. See me falling off the front there? Oh, dude. So
hey, you got out of that. Good. That was about a
Should we watch this again? Terrible. Should we watch this again?
Yeah. So this was I think it was like 2008. On 125 SX, I got thrown out to the line. See, I wasn't on the balls of my feet. Look, endo, boom. I landed good, but I just flipped right over the bars. But I did literally, you can't really see it, but an actual front roll. I mean,
yeah, I saw you come up.
Yeah, I was scratched up pretty good, but man.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's that. Hey, they were a sick bike, dude. I'd love to get one of those things. I actually had Grant Langston. After this, I'll just do the ads and then put the Grant Langston podcast out. But he actually spoke about developing that motorcycle in Europe for KTM. It was insane hearing about how they developed that bike.
You mentioned Grant Langston. When I was in the 80cc and we did the national track in Broome, Tioga. The day after, there was like he hosted like a whole training camp for.
Really?
Yeah, and I was there. I have a video of it, and it's Grant Langston showing, I just like coming around the corner. We were working on corners that day, jumps. I got that all on video. Grant Langston, man, yeah, that's going back now, man.
Sick.
So.
Yeah, he's a G, man. He puts the G in GL, that dude.
But yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming on. What's give everybody here, just so we got, mainly jiu-jitsu guys, but if they're interested in checking out your podcast, I mean, they can find, what are the jiu-jitsu guys that were on your show so far? You've had Craig, you've had Levi, you've had Lachlan.
Yeah, and then Jeremy Skinner, he's a Aussie dude. He's kind of on the scene as well. Like he was doing what's the UK one that those boys were doing quite regularly?
What is that one? Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
John, commentator for that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so like Jeremy was on that one, and yeah, he's a leg lock specialist out of Absolute. So yeah, he's been on Ben Hodgkinson. That was pretty early days. But yeah, hopefully I'll be. Well, I'm trying to sort of get over to America and do a couple more. I got Edwin Najmi's coming on pretty soon, and then I had Robert Drysdale on the podcast, but we could only do an hour. We do like a 3-hour show, And then we meant to link back, and I started building a studio. So I haven't actually got back to doing the one with Robert yet. But yeah, he's a fantastic dude. So I would definitely love to start doing more jiu-jitsu stuff in the future. But yeah, hopefully when I get to the States. And then some of the crossover stuff too is really cool. Like Jack Freestone, like he's a really good mate of mine. And he is a jiu-jitsu purple belt, and he is a fucking beast. So that he's a cool dude for anyone that likes jiu-jitsu and surfing. And then yeah, it'd be pretty cool to get a few other sort of crossover dudes on. That's something that really interests me, is like trying to find these like crossover dudes that you kind of might not know.
That'd be really interesting, man. You know, that's what I think. That's what I thought when I started watching. I'm like, man, we got to have this guy on, because there's a lot of things that we could do, and there's a lot of crossover. You know what I mean?
And it doesn't hurt that Greg loves motocross.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, just, you know, back in the day with on 80s and with guys like James Stewart and Travis Pastrana lapping me and hanging out at the it was like the Kawasaki Race of Champions was always the big so Carmichael was just in the pits hanging out with us, and then at the national track, and that was when McGrath and Emig were going at it, and we were just back you know, behind in the because we were racing there the same weekend, so we were in the back where the pits were, and just, you know, after the race walking back with Emig. I mean, you never realize how, you know, awesome and special that is back then, you know. But
well, the thing is, man, like what you're describing is essentially like you were at an open mat next to Hoist Gracie and Elio drilling. You know what I mean? So like to the people that are in jiu-jitsu, like they might not fully have the context. But like if you've been in a race with James Stewart, that's pretty much like you've been in a bracket with Hoist Gracie and slapped hands and he fucking choked you, you know? So it's like
just getting pushed out to the outside of the turn by James. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yes, and I think you've just got I guess the same respect that I have for like the top athletes. I mean, dude, like when Levi come on the podcast, we went and trained we trained together for like an hour and a half before we sat down to do the podcast. And I mean, I've rolled with a bunch of good dudes, but like it was just it was an experience that I will never forget, and it changed my jiu-jitsu, and I honestly got better at jiu-jitsu just by getting fucked up by that dude. You know,
Levi is one of my favorite guys in jiu-jitsu, because he's a young kid. I mean, the most humble kid, and we were hanging out at a Kasai show because we flew on the Kasai plane, and he spent the whole weekend with us and then flew back. And you know, his story, and I just hit him up. He's going to be coming on the show with us, and his story about training in Australia, where his gym coming up was only open mats. I just couldn't get over that. So when he comes on the show, that's going to be like a big topic for us, because for a guy like him to be on such cutting edge of like these new school and come with his own Berimbolo style and beating legends in the sport. I mean, and to come up through the ranks, not even in a structured class. I mean, that blows my mind.
So he was doing jiu-jitsu 3 months, right? And then he went to his mum and said, "Hey, I'm going to quit school and just do this." And he literally was a kid, and he'd be Facebook messaging people for every hour of the gym. And he'd like go there in the morning and he'd do the morning class and the afternoon class. And then he would structure people as a kid to go. And he just had it in his mind that like as a young, you know, 14, 15-year-old kid, that like, if I just do jiu-jitsu more than everybody else, I'll get better than everybody else. And it was that simple. And man, like the work ethic, and that's, I think, one of the coolest thing about, you know, getting to do the podcast on my end, is that like I just get to, that energy kind of rubs off, you know, and I get to hear like those stories. And yeah, for my training, like I literally think I got better at jiu-jitsu just by being in the same room as that dude and hearing him talk about, you know, the way that he trained and the effort that he put in and the way that he, you know, went about learning and the commitment and the sacrifice. It's just, yeah, it's insane the level that some of these guys, you know, push themselves to in this sport.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like the commitment certain people are making to jiu-jitsu is amazing, you know?
Oh yeah, and I guess it just speaks to the outlet. And I know for my life, man, that I think the thing. I mean, like Greg, you'd know that when you ride and you get into that zone and that flow state, that's really why we do it. Like that's a place that you kind of can't get to, or most people can't get to in everyday life. And for me, but I've raced and ridden my whole life, but nothing gets me to that place more than jiu-jitsu. And it's like, it's not guaranteed when I get on the bike. Like if I get on the bike and I do like 20 minutes worth of riding, like it's not guaranteed that that's where I'm going to go. I know there's like my brother, for example, like he's kind of just there. But for whatever reason, for me with jiu-jitsu, it's like, I'm there and I'm out. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you do 5 rolls in a day or whatever, mm-hmm. then that's like 5 times where you're just like completely gone. And yeah, I think that feeling is just like so beneficial, to your life. And I think that's why some of these guys can like dedicate their life to it, because it's like they just get into this like crazy place, where there's, all those problems and shit are gone. And then when you're in that place, like you can achieve so much as a person in terms of your performance. And I think that's why you just see these guys that they just spend their life in that zone. And yeah, some pretty crazy shit comes as a result of it.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody says. Like when they're either you're doing a moto or you're training on the mat, nothing else matters but what you're doing at that particular time. And to have those two sports be in that same respect, I mean, it's really what everybody seeks. And it's the individuality of it is really what pulled me into motocross. Was my first love, man, and then got into martial arts after that. But it's such a similar thing. And in the way you said that, you're in the zone and you get into that whole, nothing else matters but the next turn. Nothing else matters but trying to escape the side control. That whole mentality. So that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. I think we got a lot here, man. There's a lot of crossover. We got 2 awesome podcasts right here, and just give us details on where everybody can exactly find yours, because I think everybody here should be shooting over to Gypsy Tales, because there's so many big jiu-jitsu names on there that have already been on there and that are still coming on there, and it's such an awesome podcast. Where can we check that out?
Well, hopefully, if I've done my job right, if you type Gypsy Tales into anything, it'll come up. If you can't find it by Googling it, then I'm doing a shit job. But yeah, just Gypsy Tales on iTunes, Gypsy Tales on like Spotify. We got 2 YouTube channels. So one is kind of like clips, and then the other one is where the full episodes, and then just on Instagram. And yeah, hopefully we'll be doing some more jiu-jitsu content. I got some kind of stuff planned, but my body needs to cooperate a little bit. You had the guy on here that did the 60 jiu-jitsu classes in a month, right?
Oh yeah. Nick.
Yeah, Nick. I like that. I kind of actually want to do that. That's like my get back my injury time. So yeah, something like that. That'd be pretty cool. And yeah, I'd love to get some sort of moto dudes trying jiu-jitsu. And so, yeah, I'm definitely going to be trying in my own little way to get some more crossover stuff happening. If I do get stateside, I would love to come and hang out with you guys and get you back on the bike.
Oh yeah, anytime, man. Let's do that ASAP. I mean, anytime you get over here, and then but yeah, stick around after the show, man. Let's chat a little bit. But guys, make sure you like, share, subscribe. Make sure you jump on our website. We got our new reviewmyroll.com service on there. Remember, you guys can send us videos of you rolling. We send you back a black belt critiquing your rolling video. One of the best ways we believe that you guys can increase your level in jiu-jitsu. You can even have guests on our show in the past and request one of those guests to critique your roll. Make sure you guys shoot over to Gypsy Tales Podcast. Check that out, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks heaps, guys. Thanks for listening, everybody, and yeah, thanks for the invite. Humbled and yeah, stoked to be on with you guys.
Awesome, man.